Rogers TV. The following program was provided by a valued member of our local community. Rogers TV is proud to support local producers and share local voices, ideas, and opinions. For more information, please visit our website.
Welcome back to Addressing the Issues. It is Friday night, 6:30, and I have an exciting guest today. I don't usually get excited, but this is an exciting moment for me because we are tackling social media issues. I have had it with me trying to tune in on YouTube to watch some piano playing child and find that it was all set up. So then what happens is I start seeing all these sensational news articles regarding how Trudeau and this and that, and it's just clickbait that drives me crazy. And then one day I discovered our guest today, and I just want to talk about it. Boots on the Ground is a podcast that I discovered on YouTube, but it has its birth in TikTok. So please, if you look for it, it's an exciting thing. The host is really cool because he gets us directly involved in the issues of the day, not only politics and social issues, but he talks about experiences of individuals. And what gets me is that he creates a platform for open dialogue and discussion. And this is something that is not done by the political social media that is leaning from the right to the far right. And this is something exciting. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce the host of Boots on the Ground and other shows, Mr. Steve Boots. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So your podcast, it covers a wide variety of subjects. I've heard you're located in Saskatchewan,
yeah,
but you have a well grasp of not only national but international issues, and you deal with the current events, social justice, community activism. This is something big for our listeners, our viewers, and you bring a relevance between traditional and versus digital media. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted you here, because one of the things I noticed about when listening to you and then now seeing you on YouTube is you emphasize the importance of being informed, to be active in one's community, encouraging listening. There's not many people out there in political commentary today, except for a couple of your comrades that I will mention in passing, but there seems to be this hate talk radio that's just running rampant through social media, but you're taking the time to make it matter and to make people listen. And I want to applaud you for that. So,
well, thank you.
Steve, tell us more about you. Tell us about how you got started in this and what we should be caring about.
So the origins of my time as a social media creator, I always laugh about because it actually began in this very room I'm in right now. So I was a teacher for 16 years, and I was sitting in this room, my studio office, whatever you want to call it, working on report cards, and I was bored and frustrated with. So I've always been a politics watcher. Like ever since I was a kid, I've just kind of been an avid politics watcher because it was always very clear to me, always, that like whether or not you watched it, it had bearing on your life. So it was worth knowing what was going on. And so I was sitting in this room and I had been watching TikToks for a while, and I got the idea to just try it out, just to make something. And I was like, I don't know, what would I make? Well, I like The Daily Show. I like The Colbert Report. I probably want to talk about politics. And so I made a video that was very hilariously slow paced. It was so slow going back and watching it, about the resignation of the head of the Sask Health Authority. And I chose that really specifically because I was like, that's really niche. Nobody's going to care. So I'll post it, like a couple of people will watch it, and the itch will have been scratched. And 70,000 people watched it.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, I guess this is a thing I do now. And so ever since then, I've literally just been running at a sprint to keep out ahead of it. And it's funny because it's just sort of evolved very naturally. Like I started making TikToks and it was fun. And then people started commenting and I wanted to reply to those comments and try to offer a bit of insight. And so that became a part of what I did. And then I started watching politics streamers. And so I started making my own politics streams. And it all came from a place of just like saying loving politics is a weird thing to say because I don't love it. I love understanding the world, and understanding politics is sort of an essential part of that, if that makes sense.
You're talking to a 54-year-old whose parents are of Romanian descent, whose father, my father, who he just went back to Montreal. He lives in Montreal. He was with me on the weekend. It tells me stories of communism and fascism and all this stuff. He relates history and politics to me at a young age that I decided that I wanted to take political science as a career. When my dad was begging me to stay at the gas station and take over the business, I said, no, I gotta these wings go. I gotta go into politics one day. And I've never made it there. Maybe one day I will, but we'll see. But no, I understand the passion. I'm a political geek in many, many ways. And so I'm sorry.
I come at it from a different angle in a funny way, because I didn't study politics in university. So I've spent way too long in university, but I got a undergrad in English Lit and philosophy. And one of the things that I found out as I was studying literature is you can't understand the stories of the time without understanding the ideas of the time. And one of the essential ways to understand the ideas of the time is to understand the politics of the time, because the politics of the time it boils down to the relationships between people and power. And that shows up in stories no matter how you dig at it. And so it was kind of funny because I was reading all this literature and I was like, you really can't escape this political stuff. It's just dyed on the wool of everything.
It is, and that's something that I've noticed in sales or in marketing or in business. There is a hand-in-hand relationship with politics, and so let's get there. You are, in my opinion, you are one of the foremost political content creators. Let me give you that compliment. I know you're not seeking it, but I'm going to give it to you. So
thank you.
So how do you see your role shaping the political discourse of social media today? What responsibilities do you think come with your influence?
Oh man, I think any good creator, and I would aspire to be a good creator. I'm not going to sit here and say I am, but I would aspire to be. I think any good creator in the political space, more than any, has to be very acutely aware of the impacts and the responsibilities of what they say, right? And so I think that's a thing you're constantly bearing in mind. And that's why I'm always like, one of the most common questions that I get asked is, how do I vote? Right? How should I vote? And the platform I have comes with tremendous responsibility. Like, I've got enough people listening to me that I feel like if I was to say, you should vote for this person, some people would listen. So I don't. Very specifically, I say, well, it's local. Look at your local candidates. Look at the platforms who align with your ideologies and all that stuff. Because I think as soon as you decide that your goal is now to play for a team, you are something very different, right? And this is going to sound so sinister. Once you are creating content or creating media with the intention of supporting a specific political party or political angle, you're a propagandist, right? And I don't want to be that. I want to be a commentator. And I think there is an essential role, and I think social media has created this space for people to sit on the outside and commentate without being in the muck, without being in the midst of it, and without belonging to a specific team or having somebody who's involved signing your checks.
I gotcha. I hear you. No, that makes sense. It's Mel Brooks, the famous filmer. When they ask him why he focuses so much on the Nazis, he says, "My only way to attack it is through the sarcasm. Is to use the sarcasm on them and to draw the attention of people." So very, very well put on your end. I'm tarnishing your point with my comment there.
No.
But let's move forward. So you do something different than the others. So what strategy do you use to ensure that your content is engaging while still delivering the accurate, meaningful political message? I rarely see anything of yours being clickbaity, if not at all.
I hate clickbait.
I don't like it either. And I find that you have a way to, well, maybe this is the English major, you have a way to spin the word to lure me with the
Mhm.
enticement of the English language. So what strategies do you use here?
So it's funny because the strategies that I use are very rooted in being an elementary school teacher for most of my life, right? Like think about the needs of a social media audience versus the needs, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way. Think about the needs of a social media audience versus the needs of a group of children. You need something that's interesting but accessible, right? It can't be difficult to grasp. Like it can be a complicated thing, sure, but it's got to be graspable. It's got to be accessible. It's got to be fast paced. Pacing matters like crazy with young kids, but it also matters with social media audiences, right? And but there's also this element of the spoonful of sugar that I try to approach it with. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's you like so one of the funniest examples is if you hang out on my TikTok long enough, you'll see quite regularly this recurring joke I have of pictured here, where if I'm commenting on a story, I'll open it with a picture of the politician in some very innocuous pose and I'll make a very innocuous joke about it. And it's never like a joke about their bodies, it's never a joke about their appearance, it's always a joke about whatever they're doing in the photo. And if that joke is funny, the views on that video will easily triple. And it doesn't materially change the content of the video, but it's that spoonful of sugar. It's that little thing just to give you something to keep you interested. Because I know some politics is maybe not the most riveting stuff in the universe. So, what do we do to make it keep your attention without diluting the underlying message?
And for full disclosure, yesterday's image was Doug Ford doing a breath check. So sticking his hand over his mouth. So good on you. It wasn't anything sensational. So thank you very much. All right. So some of your contemporaries on the other side, are out there. They're hawking their wares. It's like join, come and take a look at this and all the clickbaiting, and then afterwards they'll sell them something. They'll that's to them. They're give me so many views so I can go to question period and be a thorn in the government side type thing. But how do you measure the impact of your content? Like some people look for viewers, some people look for numbers, but I'm interested in how do you gauge that impact on your audience's political beliefs or actions? Have you seen any tangible outcomes come from your work?
Okay, so there's sort of the big picture answer and then the narrower answer, and I'll start with the big picture. As a social media content creator, you get crazy detailed analytics. All of these social media sites have a vested interest in you creating content that gets people to watch it. And so one of the ways that they do that is by giving you really detailed analytics. And so the metric that I look for more than any other, there's two things that I look for is steady continuous growth of whatever it is. You never want to go viral. Going viral is the worst thing that can happen because you get trapped in whatever it is you went viral for and you get defined by that one thing. Like I always think of the Costco guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure they're fine, like they're not bad guys or whatever, but they're now stuck eating the same four things for the rest of their social media careers because they got defined as that. And so I look for things like returning viewers, stuff like that. Did I offer a value that made that person want to come back? Things like viewer retention. Did you stick around for the whole video? If you didn't stick around, it probably wasn't a very good video. Stuff like that. But on an individual level, I don't. So what I do to some extent, talking about politics and talking about progressive politics, is to some extent a shout into the darkness, right? You're never going to fully hear the results of it, but I think it's hard not to see things like view numbers and get the feeling it's got to be taken somewhere. But I always think of this very specific individual. His handle is Sask Farmer 7, and he has been coming to my comment section since I started in 2021, I think. Since the first video. And at first he was like a classic sort of conservative troll type, like, all these lazy bones should just get jobs and blah, blah, blah. Like all the classic talking points. And I was so tempted to block him a couple of times. And more than once I had to be like, hey, dude, tone this down. And he was like, okay, sorry, fair enough. 3 years later, he's telling me he's voting entirely differently. He has entirely rethought not only his politics, but his ideological framework for the world, the way he thinks about his fellow man. If everything I do amounts to that, mission accomplished. That's bin Laden's, right? And so is he the only one who that happened to? I doubt it. And so I take really great comfort in that. And it makes me feel like what I do matters, at least to some degree. And that's enough for me.
Well, testimonial is that I stopped watching any of that negative stuff because now I love tuning into you and to what you're providing. And that leads me to another question before I go off tangent. So, Steve, how has your experience in podcasting allowed you to engage with the political topics differently than traditional media outlets? Like, I know Lisa B had a comment early on about Keenan Bexley, and I don't want to get in there or whatever it is, but a lot of people's political commentators believe themselves to be the second coming of the traditional media, which they are not. So, but how do you do it differently? Like, because you do give entertaining stuff. You debunk that myth regarding the steel worker in Trudeau, and just yesterday in question period, they were bringing it up as if it was gospel truth, but yet nobody on the other side said no, it's been debunked. It's not. Like he can't be paying that kind of tax rate for what he was making. So let me go back to you on that. I didn't mean to hijack the question, but your experience, how have you engaged political topics differently than traditional media?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I think a lot of it really comes down to the fact that nobody signs my checks, right? And I don't mean that in a cynical way. I mean it in that, like, I think of an example like a David Moskrop, who is writing progressive stuff for TVO until he wasn't. Because when you are an opinion writer or an opinion columnist or anything like that, because I make it very clear. I get people say sometimes like, oh, I love the journalism you do. It's like, not a journalist, not a journalist. Commentator, very importantly different, right? Because our work relies on journalism. We don't do original reporting, we do commentary. And so I think recognizing, having that commentary be independent, having that commentary not be tied to a party, or even in the case of like something like if somebody's a commentator for CTV, they work for Bell. How straight can they shoot when they're talking about an issue that has to do with Bell? I don't always know, right? And so having and that's not necessarily to say that it's happening. It's to say that there's just no way for the public to always be sure of that. And so having entirely independent voices sitting out there, I think has some real value, right? Having voices that have no vested interest, and also having regional voices. Like, how many media personalities are there from Saskatchewan on the national scene? Right, the West gets neglected in a lot of ways.
And there you are. You're bringing the media back. You're bringing the central focus back on rural, Midwest Canada, right? So that's
the flyover provinces. That's us.
I've been to Saskatoon, and I love Saskatchewan, and I really would like to go out where they filmed Corner of Gas one day, because I think it's a bucket list for me to visit every place in Canada before I go away in life, because it's a beautiful country, and I'm a proud patriot in what I do. So I want to switch gears now. You are a key participant in another podcast, and you all should have two. You have, if I remember correctly, it's What the Hell Canada and Boots on the Ground. But you are also one of the musketeers of The Podcast is Broken, and you share this venue with commentators such as Brittle Star, who I find is very hilarious. Lisa B, who I find that one day, if there ever was a female Dean Martin, she would be it. And
she's got the vibe.
She's got the vibe. She's a cool cat. That's it. But when I first heard you on TikTok, and I found out about the shows, how did you decide to collaborate with these two? They were way different than with what you do and what you resonate with. And I'm interested. And then I have a follow-up question.
So it's funny because you'd think there would be some sort of elaborate backstory. And it's I vividly remember, my wife remembers this too. When Brittle Star Stewart followed me on TikTok, like you get notifications when like bigger accounts follow you.
Right.
And so he followed me and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I love that guy's stuff. He's awesome. And then he followed me on Twitter. And when you're a mutual on Twitter, you can send a DM. So I was like, hey, just thanks for the follow. I love your stuff. He's like, great, thanks for the follow. I love your stuff. Probably 2 or 3 months later, he sent me a DM. He's like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And I was like, I mean, I'm quite busy and work full time. And he's like, no, don't worry. I'll organize it. You just got to show up. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Done. Easy. And then we had a podcast. That's literally Stuart, he's one of those guys, man. He is just one of those people. And every organization, every group has one of these people, the doer, the guy who just makes things happen. And he's that. The dude hustles. And so he organized it, and it's just so funny because it's just this. It feels almost to us like a weekly Zoom call with friends. Like it is very loosely planned, and we just kind of goof around.
I do encourage anybody who's listening and watching the show. It's called The Podcast is Broken. It's on Substack, but I think you can find it just by searching on Google and getting the latest episode. And there's just this great banter, and just I'm not trying to publicize Brittlestar or Lisa V, but I'm just saying, like, I love the way all three of you tackle the issues. Like, the conservatives, how dare the liberals have a lavish and swanky type of retreat in fabulous Sudbury. Now, I'm a former sales rep, and I've been to Sudbury, and I've stayed at that hotel, and I
did you luxuriated there? Did you?
It is far from swanky or luxurious in any way. But again, if this is the way we're going to focus on the hate of a political party, I'm glad that Brittlestar and yourself and Lisa B have tackled it with tact and diplomacy. I want to get closer.
We try to focus on the substance of it more than the sort of sensation of it, but we do like to giggle at the same time. So
and for those of you tuning in, the key point here of watching Podcast is Broken is the improvised goodbye music, outro music that they create. And there it is. Is that the slide?
That's the slide whistle.
There's the slide one. I love that one. That was great. That one, and I believe Lisa B had some beads or something she was shaking last
time. Something like that, yeah.
So there we go. So as we're getting close to the end here, lastly, I wanted to see, and now we're getting philosophical, introspective.
Let's
get back to this here. Lastly, in what ways do you believe social media content creators can bridge the gap between the political apathy and active engagement in followers? Like, this show started in season 1 dealing with apathy, both at the municipal vote and the provincial elections here. And I suspect that whatever election is going to come our way is going to be an apathetic vote. Really, no one's going to show up, and that's going to be scary. But as a social media content, as a political media content creator, how do you bridge the gap between the political apathy and the active engagement for people and follow?
So it's funny because, like, it's a humongous question, but at the end of the day, it really boils down to a pretty simple one. We're in their pocket. Right? Like, at the end of the day, politics is happening in Ottawa, politics is happening in Toronto, politics is happening wherever it may be. That feels so incredibly remote to people. But more than that, there's like the traditional paths of accessing politics, of accessing news, they're struggling, right? Like, it's not like the old days where everybody used to sit down and watch the 6 o'clock news or listen to Peter Mansbridge break stuff down. That doesn't happen anymore. There's not like the Lloyd Robertson 11:30, everybody sits and watches and gets the same perspective on things. It's choose your own reality. And so being a part of that is directly accessible to people in ways that meet them where they're at is incredibly important. But the other part that's incredibly important is there will be nefarious interests taking advantage of this platform for lots of different reasons. Maybe that's just cynics who want to make a buck. Maybe that's moneyed interests who want to push a specific agenda, whatever it may be. That's all going to happen. And we know it happens, right? Like, it's not a secret. There's ads for oil companies on TikTok. So in the absence of opposing voices, of voices to challenge that narrative gets to be truth. And so we need those dissenting alternative voices. And social media is a really awesome way to do that because you don't need that sort of media infrastructure, right? Like I'm able to do all this stuff that I do in a corner in my basement, the cat's sleeping in the window, right? Like this is not exactly a high-end operation. And yet I'm able to have an impact. And so I think if we don't have people from all parts of the political spectrum and all perspectives doing that, then the absence of that creates its own set of problems. And so I if you are listening to this, watching this, and you're like, man, I should make a TikTok about politics, please do. I beg you, because we need so many people doing it from so many different perspectives for non-cynical reasons, for reasons of sincere belief. And I think that's the unique ability of social media is there are people who are just doing it for the love of the game, man.
Steve Boots, host of Boots on the Ground, What the Hell Canada, co-host of Podcast is Broken. Tell the crowd, tell the gang here how that we can reach you and any other information before we go. You've got the floor, my friend.
So you can find me on basically any platform as Steve_Boots. I stream politics daily. I actually was streaming Question Period right before we recorded today. On Twitch, Steve_Boots. On Twitter, I talk a lot of smack there. YouTube is generally the best place. All of my stuff gets compiled there. So everything I make on everything you can watch on YouTube. Steve Boots on YouTube, and go check it out. And thank you so much for having me. This was a delight.
Steve Boots, this has been a treat. I think my wife's actually going to tune into this episode more than any other episode because she wants to see you. On behalf of all of us here, if you need, if you really enjoy the show and you really enjoy the direction we're going on here at season 2, and you want to see Steve Boots back or any one of his crowd, let me know. Reach out to the studio. There we go. Big hearts and love to everyone there. So on behalf of the crew, the production team, myself, as Steve Boots, and I'm sorry, your cat's name is?
Boo Boo.
Boo Boo. We wish you a very nice evening and stay safe, Canada. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Behold Emily Carr, painter, about to encounter the force that will consume her life.
How tightly they sealed their secrets from me, humble and pleading before the great trees, awaiting the invitation from the Spirit to come meet me halfway. Nothing is still now, everything is alive. At last, I knew I must see through the eye of the totem itself, the mythic eye of the forest.
Seldom able to live by her brush, before she died in 1945, Emily Carr was in the first rank of Canadian painters.
This is my country. What I want to express is here, and I love it. Amen.
Hey, we're supposed to be at City Hall.
We're gonna build it right here.
Ah, yeah, sure. And give wetsuits to all the visitors?
No, on the water.
Hey, come on, we're talking about building something the size of 64 city blocks.
And there's no land left in Montreal.
So, get serious.
Listen, we'll build islands.
How? Dig up Montreal?
They're digging a subway, remember? You take it from there, and you put it here.
12 months and 25 million tons of fill later, St. Helens Island was reshaped